We're on, so I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Welcome to Grace Bible Church School of Theology. It's good to see everybody. And we're going to talk a little bit about mystery tonight. Not the church, but what's her name? Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots.
Well, that's a title everybody wants, isn't
It
it?
is. All right, let's open with prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much that we can spend some time in your word, that we can spend some time in fellowship. And Father, I know we're going to generate some questions, and I pray that you would produce the answers. And we'll thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thought we'd... that's fine. We're not going to change that at all. I don't have anything up there to see. But, okay. But that tells you what our subject is. That's all right. It's all right. Chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. That's where we're going to spend 17 and 18. We're going to spend a lot of time there today. And so we got one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me. Who is me? That's John the Apostle. And he said, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." All right. So that's quite a mouthful there, the angel talking to John. And so here we're describing a great harlot. We're talking about someone who was encouraging fornication. Now, in the Bible, this is interesting that God uses this sexual sin in order to describe unfaithfulness in the worship of the true and living God. He calls idolatry fornication, or for Israel it was spiritual adultery. Though the Gentile nations were long separated from the worship of the true and living God in general, Israel was a covenant people who still knew the true and living God, and they chose at times to go after false gods. And so the Gentiles were fornicators, and the Jews were idolaters and adulterers. Yes, okay? And so we should understand this in that light: spiritual fornication, spiritual adultery, worship of false gods rather than the true and living God. And that, let me continue here, and we're going to do a little background. Verse 3, "So he, the angel, carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness." Okay, out in the wilderness. "And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. If we go back to chapter 13, and it says in verse 1, "I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his 10 horns, 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name." And so we talked about this beast, haven't we, in our study of the unholy trinity: Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And so we have this woman sitting on what appears to be the Antichrist. Okay? Maybe there's a relationship there, right? For the woman was arrayed, 17:4, in purple and scarlet. Now, particularly purple at this time is associated with royalty. The way the color was put in the fabrics was very expensive. And so common people did not, there were no Minnesota Viking fans at this time. They just couldn't do it. Couldn't afford it. And so here we have wealth, and she's arrayed in royal colors, wealthy colors. She's adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, and having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written. I hope she's got a big forehead, because this is quite a title.
Had to be a big forehead.
Boom, little or fine print, but they could read this. Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Okay, so this woman on the beast, and we can associate that with Antichrist and, of course, the devil, and his is at the heart of all this. And she is called Babylon the Great. Now, we'll come back to this here if you want to put a little place marker, because we're going to spend more time in here. But I want you to go to Genesis, and we're going to go to chapter 11. And Genesis, that's the book after the table of contents. Yeah, okay. So that means it's number one. We're number one. Okay. Now, this is post-flood. Chapter 10 has been talking about people, genealogy of Noah's sons, and we're going to come back to chapter 10, but that chapter closes with these were the families of the sons of Noah according to their generations in their nations, and from these the nations were divided on the earth after the flood, all right, the worldwide flood. And so verse 1 of chapter 11 says the whole earth had one language and one speech. Isn't that seems pretty common, doesn't it? You got one family who survives the flood, and so it's pretty common in a family. There's a common language, and that language evidently is the language given to Adam and is continued. They've all been able to talk. And that after the flood, this still in that same order. Verse 2, it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar. Okay, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the earth. Now in chapter 9, it was God told Noah after he got off the ark, he says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay? And so that is understood to say, we understand from that verse, fill the earth. Okay? And do you know who built the first city in the Bible? It's here in Genesis. No. He's a city builder, though. It was Cain. Cain went out and built a city. And with the nation of Israel, cities are are not the design, generally speaking, for how God wanted them to live. They were agricultural people. They were given territories and lands for their families. And it was not a blessing to live in a city where your house shared a wall with the next house, shared a wall with the next house, shared a wall with the next house. And so where are our crime centers in America? Cities. And I'm not going to talk about the political association, but these cities are, there's a lot of trouble in them, okay? And they decide, let's make a name for ourselves. Now, the natural course of things is that people are sheep and they're followers, right? And so you don't have all these people coming up with the same idea. Evidently, they're being fed or encouraged in this direction, and we'll find out about that. But anyway, this is not God serving. This is not God honoring. And a tower whose top is in the heavens, from the Hebrew, I understand that it could be understood dedicated to the heavens or to the worship of the heavens. And so here, where is this place? Well, the Lord, in verse 5, they didn't want to be scattered. They wanted to live together in a city. And, it's neat, some of these creation groups, they have some neat teaching and theories about this, and the beast that used to be friendly with people, now they're afraid of people. And when will a dog bite you? Usually when the dog is afraid, he'll bite you. And then so people for various reasons want to stick together, okay, and for protection or whatever. But God teaches that He is our protector. And obedience to God is the safest place in the world to be, isn't it? And so anyway, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the sons of man have built. And the Lord said, indeed, the people are one. They have one language. And this is a wonderful thing. There is peace and unity among all the people. No, I'm making that part up because that's not what it says. And this is what they begin to do. Now, nothing that they propose will be withheld from them. Look at today. Daniel, we saw that Daniel said in the last days that knowledge would increase. People running to and fro and knowledge increasing. And so it's not talking about just, well, they're going to be a little smarter than they were before. We're no smarter than these people. But what we are is we have multiplied knowledge from generations. And that is shared. And the more we communicate, the more it all comes together on the internet or wherever. Knowledge is increasing. And so what can we do? Well, we can make, who knows? If we continue, it's like this. Nothing that they propose will be withheld from them. If God let us go, I mean, if people wanted to, and there's some talk like some crazy scientists that will splice animal DNA into human beings and make super soldiers or whatever it is, monsters maybe. Who knows what man will be able to do if it continues, because knowledge is increasing. And here, as God saw them together, He says, now, this is not good. Okay? And so let us go down and confuse their language that they may not understand one another's speech. And that is a non-violent solution. Isn't that nice? God had a violent solution with the flood, and here He has a non-violent solution. And so the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the earth because they wouldn't go like He asked them to, and they ceased from building the city. Verse 9, therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad on the face of the earth. Now here is where that word starts. This is the root of it, Babel. It means confusion, okay? Now Babylon comes from this word. And let's go back to chapter 10. And so in verse 6, the sons of Ham, this is the son of Noah, were Cush. And then in verse 8, Cush begat Nimrod. Okay, so there's Noah, there's Ham, there's Cush, then there's Nimrod. All right, so there's the family tree. And he, Nimrod, became a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And so Nimrod is this mighty man. It doesn't give us a lot of details about him. He is post-flood. He's the great-grandson of Noah. And he is a mighty one on the earth. And he's a hunter. And so if the animals, some of the animals seem to be most dangerous, Nimrod he's the guy, you know, he'll keep you fed, he'll keep you safe. He's a great guy, okay? He's a mighty hunter before the Lord. And so some have understood this to point out that he is working against God, not with God. Thus leading to the let's make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad. And so this is in Moses' day, this was a saying. He was a mighty hunter, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. So that was a comparison to greatness, I imagine. This guy was a great leader. Now, we've talked about Nimrod before as a precursor to a future great leader. Do you remember who that was? The future great leader? Not great in the fact that he's good, desirable, the Antichrist. He will be a great leader and people will follow him. Nimrod is a type or precursor to that. And notice what it says in verse 10. The beginning of Nimrod's kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. And from that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh. So he's a great builder of cities. But what was the first one? Babel. Okay, so this places Nimrod, I believe, at the Tower of Babel. We have him associated with it. Is he the instigator behind the building the tower? But whether that be, here's a man who is pulling people not to God, but from God. Paul spoke to the Athenian elders in Acts chapter 20, the Ephesian elders, and he told them that I know after my departure, men from among you will arise, drawing disciples after themselves. You see this tendency that goes on today, that people are building their kingdoms rather than building the kingdom of God. And so this is associated also with Nimrod. And he's like the first, the most successful. But God thwarted his efforts so that he couldn't accomplish what he wanted to, even though he accomplished probably magnificent things in a worldly sense. God kept him from prospering beyond the limitations that God put on him. So we've got Nimrod, a type of Antichrist associated with Babel, which is associated with the worship of the heavens and rebellion against God. So there are the roots of this. Here, the foundation of Babel, we find what we need to know about Babylon. Why Babylon? Well, later on, there's going to be a kingdom, Babylon, probably the continuation of this city, Babel, and not the tower, but the city, Babylon. it became the headquarters, if you would, of the kingdom of Babylon. Now, Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon defeated the greatest kingdom of that time, the Assyrians. And in Daniel's vision, you remember Babylon, in Nebuchadnezzar's vision, was the head of gold in the image that he saw in the vision, Nebuchadnezzar saw in his vision. That image describes the kingdoms of the Gentiles that rule over God's people, Israel. Okay? Now, Babylon there is associated with idolatry, but also a persecution of God's people. And so, by that time, they are great, they are wealthy, they are worldly, they are... If Nebuchadnezzar, he is the lesson on pride, isn't he? Nebuchadnezzar says, look at this great Babylon that I have built. And then God struck him with a form of insanity for a few years until he acknowledged that God ruled from the heavens. So, any questions yet? Good. Y'all are listening, or you're sound asleep. All right, let's go back then to Revelation 17. All right, so now you know these are foundational principles about using Babylon. So why is this called Mystery Babylon the Great? And so what we know about this is the mother of harlots, or spiritual idolatry. What do we believe was the purpose of the Tower of Babel? It was the worship of the heavens. It is the beginning of the Babylonian religion, which is polytheistic, okay? And so man was first introduced to his creator and understood there is one God. Man was then introduced to polytheism as an escape from the authority of God. They didn't go from belief in the Creator to atheism. They went to worship of false gods, substitutes for God. And somebody said that in the beginning God made man in his image, and ever since man has been making gods in man's images. So you know about these pagan deities, how they reflect the people, how they reflect the different strengths and weaknesses of men and deities. And that's all they are, is big, powerful men that rule from Olympus or somewhere, And they had arguments, and they had fights, and they had petty desires and all those things. They were just reflecting the men who created them. But that's part of the Babylonian religion. And you can do some research on that. There is, my goodness, there's so much written about that. But the fact is that what the Bible says is that there is a common source for every false religion in the world. And it goes back to Babel, okay? That's the source. That's the mother. That's where birth was given. And so Babylon here, whatever this mystery Babylon the Great is, it is a source of deception and idolatry. Teaching spiritual unfaithfulness. And so, 17 verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus Christ. So what do we know about this woman also is that she is a persecutor of God's people. The saints. Yep. God's people. Now, you remember that in Revelation chapter 13, the beast, in his in verse 7, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And so we have this in common, don't we? Persecuting the saints. And this woman is drunk with him. She's just filled with it and enjoys it. And when I saw her, John says, I marveled with great amazement. This is something impressive, okay? Have you ever seen something that maybe it wasn't good, but it was impressive? All right. Evil can be quite impressive. All right. Verse 7, but the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her. And you say, boy, isn't the Bible wonderful? It's going to explain all this to me. All right. Who needs teachers? The Bible explains itself. And so the beast that carries her and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottom of the pit and go bottomless pit and go into perdition. Thank you. That explains everything, doesn't it? And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Okay, so that's perfectly clear when we understand something here. She was sitting on a scarlet beast back in verse 3, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, what did we say the 7 heads were? 7 kingdoms. Okay? And there's a negative relationship between each kingdom and the people of God. It begins with Egypt. Let me start here. And then the next was Assyria. And then there was Babylon. And then there was Medo-Persia. And then there was Greece. That's 5. And then there was Rome. And so it says, yeah, okay. 7 is the kingdom of the Antichrist. So the 8th is of the 7th. We'll see all that stuff. Clears a bell. And so this beast, this image, it was and is not and yet is. Clear. Okay. Well, we've had this beast or this image of the Gentile kingdoms, we've had it on hold, if you would, in relationship to Israel. But the spirit of Antichrist was alive in John's day. He's the one who uses the word in his epistle, right? But this is going to be the spirit of Christ, of Antichrist, is still reigning, but it's going to be personified. And so verse 9 says, here is the mind which has wisdom. All right, you know this, you understand it. Okay, the 7 heads are 7 mountains. Now, the word for mountain there, it means something that rises up out of the plain, not the airplane, the plane in Spain. Never mind. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. Yeah, okay. And so it could be a hill or it could be a mountain, depending on the context of it. But there's a word for it, okay? And I'll mention why I say that in shortly here. So the woman's has 7 heads, and the woman sits on these 7 heads. The beast that has the 7 heads. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. There are also 7 kings. All right, so now we're talking about kingdoms. 5 have fallen. So Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. At this time, they're gone. Why? Because there's one empire that's ruling, and it's not those. It's Rome. Rome at this time. So one is, and the other has not yet come. Okay? So we're talking about beasts and animals and women, but you can't lose that Daniel's prophecy about the image and the kingdoms that it refers to. Okay? So the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short time. So you see, Egypt was a kingdom for a long time, right? And significant amount of time for the Assyrians. Babylon, not so long, decades. They had a short ride, but it was wonderful. The Persians, good while. The Greeks, the Romans, long time, right? But this last one is just for a short time. And it's generally associated with 42 months or 1260 days or 3.5 years or times and half a time. Okay, so that in relationship to the other kingdoms is pretty short, isn't it? And so, and the beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th and is of the 7. So this last kingdom, the beast is involved in that. If he's in leadership, of course, during that time, he is of the 7th. And so, but he is significant enough that he's called the 8th. He's of the 7, and he also has an appointment with perdition. There's 10 horns. There are 10 kings who have received no kingdom yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So these 10 kings they will rise to power or be associated with the kingdom of the Antichrist. And they will give their power and authority to the beast. They cede their authority to him. These will make war with the Lamb will overcome them, and he is Lord of Lords, King of Kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Okay. The angel goes on to explain that the waters which you saw, and we've referred to this verse before, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So the harlot's influence over the people of the earth seems to be worldwide. Okay, that's where the Antichrist rises up out of the sea humanity, right? Well, here the harlot is associated, she has influence, she sits upon peoples from all over the world, it looks like. And it's not just one tongue like in Babylon. When they started the tower, it's still a diversified languages. The 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. That means they don't like her anymore. And so they turn on her. Now, this happens all the time in Satan's world. It should never happen in the church, should it? That the saints turn on one another, but this is what happens there. So they've been, we see in chapter 18 that they've been, I think they're going to have second thoughts about destroying her. You know, they hated her while she was there, they killed her, and then they missed her after she was gone. That sounds like a great plot for a mystery story, doesn't it? Okay, or a country song. One or the other. And so anyway, God put it in their hearts, fulfilled his purpose to be of one mind, to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God fulfilled. And so we've seen this before all the way back. Great example is Pharaoh. You know, Pharaoh doesn't want to let God's people go, but God works in his heart to make him strong to stick to his guns and until God can take him through 10 plagues. And so God works in the hearts of men, and not just people who believe in him, but people who resist him also have been used, and God exerts his authority in that way. So the woman that you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, this throws some monkey wrenches into some of our interpretations here. And so we're trying to figure out, can we identify today, Babylon the Great? Can we? And so that's why he came out tonight, isn't it? Because I was going to tell you who it is. You didn't fall for that, did you? But there are some theories about this. And I'm going to tell you the most popular theory about who Mystery Babylon, the Great Mother of Harlots, at this time is. Now, I want you to recall that this is associated with the Gentile kingdoms. It's associated all the way back to Nimrod and Babel. And so with that in mind, the manifestation of Babylon during the tribulation, that can be something that can be identified locally in a sense, or in time. So it's described as a city. Now, the most popular view of this, and this is not new to our generations, it goes back quite a ways, and you can understand why. The most popular view about who Babylon the Great is, the mother of harlots, is the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? That is by far, if you read and research this, you'll find way more information on that than anything. And there are some amazing parallels, okay? One of the things that people like to refer to is this city is associated with 7 mountains or hills. And so Rome was known as the city built on 7 hills, okay? And so that's not mountains, but again, the word reflects the context. And so it's not far-fetched to say that that can't be Rome. Rome, actually, if it's the city we're talking about, it's hard to imagine actually a city that is better suited to fulfill this description, because this woman, this city, has had influence on people worldwide. And so is there really any place of significance that you can go in the world and not find a Roman Catholic church? I don't. They're worldwide. They really are. They are wealthy. When it talks about arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones, having a golden cup, you can see why somebody would say, well, look, have you ever been to the Vatican? Have you ever looked at what these people wear and what the wealth and the gold and the da-da-da-da-da? It's like it's the wealthiest organization on the face of the earth. It is. But what about, isn't it drunk with the blood of the saints? Well, if you know anything about the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuits and some of the Inquisitions, and at times the church had no problem in doing away, burning at the stake or whatever it was that they decided, you don't agree with us, we'll get rid of you. And so there's that history that goes there also. So the blood of the saints, we just celebrated Reformation Sunday, and you read about I mean, some of these Reformation fathers, and going back to pre-Reformation, John Huss burned at the stake. William Tyndale burned at the stake. I mean, they're just, if there were any Huguenots not left, they would tell you about persecution by the Roman Catholic Church. So there is something there that is there are parallels. Now, does that mean that Babylon the Great is the mother of harlots? Well, I remember going into a particular Catholic church, and the number of shrines and idols and icons, and it was astounding. It was just astounding how many things there were to bow to, pray to, offer to. I mean, really, I was raised Presbyterian. We just had Jesus, and and so there are plenty of connections between the pagan Roman Empire and then moving into what is called the Roman Catholic Church, and the kind of blending of worship of these things. So there is, boy, there's a bunch of parallels there. Now, that being said, it's possible that, since that right now seems to be the most popular and the best explanation of what we see, well, maybe it's so. The apostate Roman Catholic Church that goes into the tribulation, it's wealthy, it's powerful. You look at some of the history, and who did Martin Luther? He was confronted by cardinals and church leaders, but also by kings. And kings were blessed with their authority and their power by Rome during those times in Europe. So we have that. Now, our world that has been influenced and has benefited from this church and this organization for years is becoming more secular. And so it's possible that we can understand why the secularized global world would turn its ire toward the church and religion. And so anyway, well, there are some other theories that I have. There's some parallels here with when it's talking about that great city. If you go back to Revelation chapter 11, and there is, and here we read about in verse 4, 3, it says, I give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. They're the 2 olive trees, 2 lampstands standing before God and the earth. So here are 2 men that are intercessors for God in the world. And they actually have the power to bring down fire from heaven, and the power to shut rain from the heavens, and turn the waters into blood. And there's similarities between Moses and Elijah here. And Moses and Elijah, I like to think of them as the 2 witnesses, because this is the law and the prophets are represented by these 2 witnesses. It's what they can do. Moses, the law; Elijah, representing prophets. And so this was God's witness to the world through Israel. And so here are these 2 witnesses, the Word of God. And they're personified here. And they have a conflict with the beast, and they are slain. And it says let's look at verse 7. when they finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit, now that is the false prophet, wasn't it? Okay? So the false prophet will make war against them, overcome them, and kill them. And so the false prophet is also given, like the beast, he receives his power, beast, and he's able to overcome and persecute the saints. And these two witnesses are significant. Verse 8 says, their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city. Okay? And so, back in chapter 17, verse 18, the woman you saw is that great city. Okay? That reigns over the kings of the earth. It's a great city which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. So it says, spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. Doesn't say that's the name on the map when you're looking for this. But it says, it's where also our Lord was crucified. So there's only one place that Jesus was crucified, Jerusalem. And so this great city is also referred to spiritually as Sodom and Egypt. Those are not compliments. God is not saying good things about Jerusalem here, but it's called a great city. Now, the problem with, so Jerusalem is in the running here for, but there are some problems with that, aren't there? I mean, it doesn't seem to fit the other descriptions like maybe Rome does, as far as being worldwide, having power, kings of the earth, acknowledging Jerusalem, though 7 hills, 7 kings. But the fact is that God calls Jerusalem a cup of trembling, and it is even today, isn't it? I mean, it is the center of trouble. Did you see the video with Safari and talking about Israel preparing for war with Iran? Okay, there's always some trouble going on over there, isn't there? I mean, they are openly speaking of preparing for war with Iran. The theory, their talk is that Iran, because we're so wishy-washy, limp-wristed now, that America has allowed Iran to accelerate its nuclear bomb production or pursuit, and that it's felt like they have enough now to put together a bomb. And so yeah, all right, so Israel's got to go. That's what they've been saying. And so is that. Well, turn to Galatians in chapter 4. Now here we're really getting into church scriptures here, but look what Paul says about this. And verse 21, Galatians 4:21, it says, "Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a bondwoman, a slave, the other by a free woman." That's some, women's feminists don't see married women as free, do they? But the Bible does. Sarah was free. Okay. But he who was of the bondwoman, the son of the slave, was born according to the flesh. This is an allegory, okay? And so Ishmael is a picture here, Hagar and Ishmael, and that birth. And he that was born of the free woman, or Sarah, that's Isaac, through promise, which things are symbolic. For these are the 2 covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, where the law came, which gives birth to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is. So the picture here is Jerusalem that Paul is talking about. He's not speaking of it as something pleasing to God. Okay? In fact, in a few years from this writing, Jerusalem is going to face a horrible judgment and be destroyed, isn't it? But the Israel that now is corresponds to bondage under the law. Okay? But, verse 26, the Jerusalem above, and Revelation is going to tell us about a new Jerusalem that descends from heaven, is free, which is the mother of us all, for it is written, da-da-da-da-da. And verse 28, we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of promise. And so we have a contrast here between two cities. We've got the earthly Jerusalem in Paul's day, and then we've got the new Jerusalem that will come down in the new heavens and the new earth. Okay? And so there's a contrast between these cities. The Jerusalem that was, it was facing judgment. God was not pleased with it. And so there's another reason some people say, well, I think Jerusalem is in the running. And it is this great city that's mentioned in Revelation. But whatever, Babylon, at her roots, goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. Goes all the way back to Nimrod. That's when she became the mother of all sorts of idolatry, all sorts of spiritual adultery, and it's continued. So it's a mystery, and that means it's a secret. Okay? And so it will be revealed at the time what form this Babylonian religion, this organization, this entity will take during the time. But whether it's a organized church is described also as a city. Jerusalem today does not seem to fit that city that has the worldwide influence over people. During the reign of Antichrist, that could really, really change. Do you understand? He's going to go to Jerusalem. That will make Jerusalem worldwide significant. He's going to enter the temple and declare himself to be God. It's like he's staking claim. He's setting his throne there in Jerusalem. Why? Because that's where Jesus is coming back and putting his. All right? So, while we have a lot of things that don't apply now, that does not mean that Jerusalem could not be the great city where all this takes place. All right, so we got just a few more minutes, and there's some things that are mentioned in Revelation 18 that we should look at with Mystery Babylon. And this is the downfall. And so the angel is really excited. And verse 2, he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison of every foul spirit, a cage for every unclean and hated bird. Now, there have been some times where in fairly recent history that Jerusalem was not a tourist destination. And but Jerusalem is the center of the judgments and everything that comes upon the tribulation time. And so this is something that could rule out Jerusalem as far as what happens here. All the nations have drunk wine with the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. So this brings up maybe the third one, that's because today, use something today. Who has the greatest economy on the face of the earth that if it absolutely collapsed would turn the whole world into a tailspin? United States of America. Okay. Who exports more pornography than any other country in the world. Oh yeah, the USA. And so there's some negatives about us. And just listen to Iran. They call us the great Satan. And but anyway, that's a third one in the running, but I don't know. I heard a voice saying from heaven, saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive her plagues." Matthew 24, Jesus says, "You who are in Jerusalem, flee." Okay, come out. And for her sins have reached to heaven, and God's remembered her iniquity. Remember to her just as she render to her as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. And the measure she glorified herself and lived in luxury, the same measure of her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, I see no sorrow. The religious leaders of Jesus' day says, we have never been slaves. We are free men, and we're God's people. We're sons of Abraham, sons of God, da-da-da-da-da. And he says, you don't understand that you are poor and wretched. And anyway, she will utterly be burned with fire, for strong is the Lord who judges her. Now, this is where I mention this. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her, for they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. And merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, pearls, fine linen, of purple, silk, scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, and da-da-da, all this nice stuff. They even slaves, it goes on to say. So she's going to be destroyed, and they're going to miss her. They're going to miss her. That's a song, isn't it? You're going to miss me when I'm gone. All right. So anyway, it seems to be a great city that falls during the tribulation. And when she's gone, she changes the lifestyle for a lot of people. Now, there's a lot of people who need their lifestyle changed. And so that's part of the effect of the tribulation that is going to confront people with the holiness of God, what things are important and what are not. And people are still going to have to make choices based on what God has said. And if they don't, they're going to be deceived and deluded and trapped, and it won't turn out well. All right, so now you know everything there is to know about Mystery Babylon. No. Questions? So it's either the Catholic Church or Jerusalem or America, I guess, or something else.
I was listening to something today where people are seeing the apparitions in Mary.
Uh-huh.
And they travel to different places.
Yes.
And supposedly it's like part of the Antichrist, using that to.
Yeah.
And like the Catholic Church and the Muslims will come together because they both have a belief in Mary.
Hmm.
And
Well, there's theory the source of Islam is actually the Roman Catholic Church. So, there's, I don't know. But, yeah, there's a lot of mysticism in the Catholic Church. And
the Pope now wants a one-world government, of course, and he's actually a Jesuit, which I'm not sure what's significant. I think it's because
the Jesuits were an order of Catholicism that swore to serve the Pope unto death, and And so they used to evidently fight with a sword, but they moved into education and found it was much more, they could accomplish much more teaching people than they could killing them. So, but it's got a, they pledged total allegiance to the Pope.
Well, I think they were saying that he was the first Jesuit pope,
Hmm.
one that's pope today.
Wow. Okay. So, anyway, our time is up. So there we are. You're turning off the internet right now. And then people got